Now, the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg has dismissed the Democratic Alliance's bid to have the EFF's national shutdown declared unlawful. A national shutdown is planned across the country on Monday, with everything except essential services expected to come to a standstill. The EFF is calling for the resignation of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the end to load shedding and other pressing issues in the country. In the order, the EFF is, however, interdicted from shutting down schools, retail stores, businesses, trade and public roads. In addition, the political party is interdicted from calling for, promoting, instigating or organizing the blocking of roads or railway lines and/or the shutting down of schools, retail stores, businesses and trades. The party is further interdicted from organizing or participating in or inciting others to organize or participate in any unlawful conduct and/or unlawful protest action, and lastly, inciting violence. Well, to help us unpack some of that, we're now joined by legal analyst Modedi Mabanya, who's an advocate, and he joins us now via Zoom. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Yes, good evening, and good evening to your viewers.
All right, let's unpack this bid that the DA put forward. When I read the order, it sounds as if they were denied, but they got almost everything they wanted.
Yes, I think let's probably contextualize it. The right of freedom of assembly and protest is one of the rights in Chapter 2 of our Constitution. And it's also regulated by laws of general application, amongst others, the Gatherings Act. I would be very concerned if the court had banned the EFF from protesting, or anybody for that matter, unless there were exceptional circumstances which would warrant a serious limitation of that right. Because as part of the mainstay of our constitutional democracy, the right to protest is one of the entrenched rights. At the same time, the court has asserted that it is not only the EFF and the groups that participate in the protest or in the march or the shutdown, as they call it, who have rights, but that everybody else have rights. So the court basically struck a balance between the right to protest and the rights of others. For instance, I have a right to be safe. I have a right not to be intimidated or harassed by anybody. And that's basically what the court has done. It says, I'm protecting your right to protest. You do it lawfully. I also protect the rights of those who are not part of the protest, who must go around their normal business.
All right, so let's unpack this the stuff that's been interdicted, though, and what the consequences might be. So a lot of it is obvious. You can't incite violence, etc., etc. But whilst we are calling it an EFF march, the reality is actually anybody can protest on Monday, and they may not belong to the EFF. If they are involved in violence, do they get dealt with by the law in their individual capacity, or do people like the EFF get brought into it?
Yes, Peter, I think it's a very interesting question that you're asking. Firstly, it's not only the EFF which is participating in this. I know that SAFTU is, and I noticed that they've been distributing flyers about the protest. What then raises the question is, who is the organizer or the convener, as the gatherings regulations say? And I have a sense that the political parties which have called their members to participate constitute conveners alongside the EFF and any other organization that participates. But the court order goes beyond the members and the leaders of the EFF because it's just specifically against the EFF, including the supporters. Now, the definition of supporters should of necessity include anybody who joins in support of this protest. Not necessarily that person agrees with the EFF, but because that person supports the activity of the EFF, which is this action. What we don't know exactly, I must be honest, is when you call it a shutdown, are you saying there's going to be a gathering, or are you saying people are going to stay at home? But there's been also a lot of talk about what will happen if you don't do this. There's talk that suggests that people will be in the streets. So effectively, it's a gathering. And I know, for instance, SAFTU has said that they're using Section 77. Be that as it may, they still have to comply with the Gatherings Act. So I suppose that in those instances where it would be established, if it established that the offender is a member of SAFTU, for instance, SAFTU will be held responsible.
All right, so I've got a feeling there could be people up to mischief, and they'll just put on a red T-shirt, cause chaos and mayhem, and then the EFF might get blamed for it, and this guy might not belong to the EFF. What does one do in situations like that?
Peter, the regulations seek to deal with exactly that by requiring that the convener be identified, that the convener give notice to the police, that the police meet the conveners, that there be marshals. So there's a whole set of logistics. Now, in law, obviously, in common law, when you create a situation, you have the responsibility to prevent harm to others. So there is a risk, obviously, with this type of activity that indeed you could have what we call agent provocateurs being supplied with T-shirts, and they join the marchers and they create the chaos. And of course, they will look like EFF people. They might not be EFF people, but because the EFF is the convener, it has certain legal responsibilities. So whether those are agent provocateurs or not, for instance, if the EFF doesn't arrange marshals and the crowds get out of control, they will still be responsible whether those are their members or not. Because as I say, the court has also spoken about supporters, not just members.
There have been calls for spontaneity. So it's not as if a march is going to start at a particular place, march through certain streets and end at another position. They are calling for spontaneous activity right around the country. My question then becomes, where do laws apply where people gather, let's say, more than 50 in one place, and they block a road because they're busy walking together? The interdict prohibits this, doesn't it? You've muted yourself again.
Clearly identified where it comes from. And I think, and as I said, not only the EFF, but I know SAFTU, I know political parties have called their members to join.
Advocate Timanya, you look like you're on mute again. I think you're back.
Am I muted? Can you hear me now?
You're back now, yes.
Yes. I'm saying if you look at the order of the Western Cape High Court is very specific that the conveners must comply with the law. And the law in this case is the Gatherings Act in particular and the regulations. But remember, police have the inherent power to stop any protest. And the police, in the normal course of their business, will attend probably to anybody who breaks the law. So if people were to convene and converge spontaneously, and the police cannot identify who's the convener, the police cannot determine compliance with the law, the police will ordinarily have to act and ensure that that is disrupted. Let me refer you to the judgment of the Labour Appeal Court in the recent Nehau protest. And the court was very scathing on the failure of the police to enforce the law. And I think it sets the tone on what is expected of the South African police services. But as you can see, there's been quite significant mobilization. I do understand that the minister seems to suggest, no, we want a normal visible policing, but it's actually meant to counter any eventuality that may arise out of this so-called shutdown.
Advocate Manya, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed. Your insights always greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's legal analyst, advocate Mudidima Manya, talking to us about some of the legal implications regarding the interdicts that's been given down by the courts in the Western Cape, and I would imagine much of that is standard law that applies to other parts of the country as well.